All right, here we are. We're live for both the truck race at St. Petersburg or Pittsburgh. Is it Petersburg, Pittsburgh, whatever? And then the Xfinity race at COTA. Both races will be talked here. I'll probably be for at least an hour and 15 minutes because I got nothing better to do right now. You know, if you got any questions or anything, feel free to throw them in the chat. If let me just make sure this is there. Cool. Yeah. If you do want 50% off your first month of a PayDirt membership, which right now the price is $40. You can get a membership for $20 a month. Use the code PD Welcome for 50% off your first month. I mean, nothing's going to be shown on the screen because we've moved away from that. Everything is behind the paywall, but I'll be talking about how I'm looking at both these races and my approach and at least opinions like that. When we look at where we're coming off of Atlanta, actually, first off, what a disastrous Atlanta. Uh, Weekend. That was brutal for both the. I think every race I had, everybody got completely like obliterated. Right, Bell gets wrecked at the very end of the Cup race, and solidifies no money being made. All my pivots literally got killed on like lap 5 of the Xfinity Series race, and then everybody who I played last week uh, at Atlanta is starting the back here because they all ran into issues. We'll just reiterate, Hemrick broke a suspension. Tanner Gray had a tire go down. He went 4 laps down. Ty Majeski had a tire go down. He went 3 down. Lane Riggs had an issue. He had to pit, went multiple laps down. Infinger had the same issue, barely got back in somewhat contention for a lucky dog, and then we just had yellows and yellows. Caden Honeycutt had an issue. Stuart Friesen ran out of fucking gas. Like what are these idiots doing, right? And so when we look at the starting grid today, it was set by the metric just since we didn't have a qualifying condition. NASCAR only brought 2 sets of wet tires, and they didn't want to waste one of them during or having them be used in qualifying. Also, they didn't want the different groups to have different track conditions, so they just canceled qualifying. And they practically did not have any practice. If anything, we had 3 to 4 laps of practice for these guys because Cole Butcher knocked the wall down and then continued to be a moving chicane and then hit the wall again and then got stuck in a tire barrier. And so literally these guys, if you made it onto the track, you got quote unquote shakedown, not even like you may have had 1 to 2 laps at like somewhat decent speed, but this is the first time any of these guys outside of the IndyCar regulars or retirees or whatever, outside those guys, these people have never been on a street course, right? We typically see that trucks at road courses are typically pretty volatile in terms of the aggression standpoint because most people end up overshooting corners, they get in the grass, whatever the case may be. The fact that we have literally everybody who was in a good car last weekend are like in the the special cars, team cars, where you don't have full-time drivers, you're just bringing in good people, like Kyle Busch came in last weekend, so on and so forth. Hocevar came in last week, and so on and so forth. So we have a lot of people hopping in cars today that are, in decent vehicles, but they're in here because of their name or because of, that's, Tricon special, truck or the special truck for Spire, whatever. So we have, you have Hinchcliffe, Franchitti, Adam, tons of guys coming in from the open wheel side because this is seen as the what is it called? I just went blank. Secondary series for the IndyCar at St. Pete, and oddly enough, like you listen to these IndyCar guys talk about it, and they're like, for whatever reason, they are very intimidated by the fact that this is a support class and that they are like really actually nervous about running this race, right? So we have all that going on. Yet again, compared with or compiled with where everybody finished last weekend, being a major uh, reasoning of where these guys are starting, you have first off in the back your final 4 starters: Hill, Mayer, Hemrick, Sutton, real cars. We would not have that if we had qualifying happen. We then have Eckes, Gray, Riggs, Enfinger, and Ty Majeski starting the back half of the field, right? We see that this racetrack, and I don't have it saved on this sheet at the moment, so I got to check, wait for scoring here while I bring up this because it's not on my sheet that I'm using here. This is an 80-lap race, okay? Now you got to remember, this is not a regular road course, so we have non-competitive pit stops. That means nobody gains or loses positions based on pitting. You don't have to short pit or anything like that. What that does mean is that your speed on the track, right? The drivers you are, the cars that you are in, is the only way you're going to be able to pass people, right? Who are the people in this race that would realistically have a decent shot of running pretty well? I'm going to go through the entire grid really fast, and if you're not aware of the grid, I'm sure you can find it somewhere, right? I guess I don't want to show that on screen. Anyway, I would argue Mozak, Connor, Chandler Smith, Jake Garcia. Those are the only guys I see in the top 10 worth anything. Haley, Dye, Ankrum, Andres, Queen, Friesen, Caden, Chris Wright. Those are the only people in the top 20, right? And then you get in the back half of the field where it's Majeski, Enfinger, Riggs, Gray, Eckes, Sutton, Hemrick, Mayer, Timmy Hill. You see that a good portion of the back half of the field has, the people that we would expect to be able to at least contend for a top 15, top 12, or whatever, right? And so when we're looking at guys who start up front that you could, consider leading laps, I mean, sure, Mozak is starting first, but I'm fairly reluctant to play any major guys starting up front to lead a lot of laps. I mean, the people that I would project laps probably in this order would be Chandler Smith, Ben Rhodes, Giovanni, Connor Mozak. But even still, I think if you were purposely, or if you're playing anybody in the top 5 starting positions, you are doing it just to get different, just to get some, different exposure or whatever, different builds going on and stuff. I'm not going to tell you what my final exposure was, but I'm using all of our PayDirt data and the portfolio manager and stuff, and I'm using lineups that are coming from that because those are lineups that I would just end up building. It's got my seal of approval, or at least what I would want from something using my data, right? And I ended up I'm running 40 lines today, and right off the bat in the first run, I ended up with 95% Hemrick, 95% Eckes, and 95% Lane Riggs. Now I move those down. I won't tell you where they ended up at, but I think that gives you a pretty good idea of where the good plays should be coming from. And then you're going to have people, or you have individuals like Gray, Enfinger, and Majeski who are, pivots are in a very similar range as those people, right? And so, for better or worse, we are back to probably playing, 4 guys from 22nd on back, if not slightly more, depending on how chaotic this race is. Okay, yet again, we have no practice. We have no runoff room practically here. And, I think this is a real situation to where we could have a lot of yellows and a lot of restarts. And now that means chaos, obviously, at the end of the race. But I think that does help a lot of people in the back, as long as they don't, have a checkup or whatever on literally the first lap for these guys to survive and get through. I don't think I really need to go into detail about, why Lane Riggs would make sense, why Eckes would make sense, Hemrick, Enfinger, Majeski, Friesen. Those guys are like clear chalk, right? Obviously, we can all understand why. What I'm more concerned about, or what I'm focusing rather, is pivots that make my lineup somewhat trying to get it unique. I am concerned about duplications in this race, not necessarily the COTA race for Xfinity. I want to start from the bottom of the grid and going up. I really like Timmy Hill. The fact that he's starting last, I would be incredibly shocked to see him get involved in a crash. When we look at everybody starting in the top 15 who will most likely lose positions, I got Timmy Hill projected for 29.45 points. That is probably at least going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 drivers in this race, just as like a baseline, with him finishing, 27th, 26th, so on and so forth. I think Timmy Hill makes a lot of sense. I think Ben Mayer starting 35th makes a lot of sense. I think it makes a lot of sense playing these two together. I think it makes sense using them as your value or one-off. Same thing with Dawson Sutton, right? I have no real interest in playing any of the Reum trucks, any of the auxiliary, back markers and stuff. Carter, Nathan, Derek White. I really don't want to play them. I don't want to play Jackson Lee. I don't want to play Frankie Muniz. So those are drivers I'm going to be avoiding. When I now look at pivots of where to kind of finalize my lineups and stuff, pricing's allowing you to get in the range of Friesen, Queen, Andres, Tyler Ankrum, Justin Haley, Jake Garcia pretty easily. I seem to be leaning towards Andres starting 14th just because I think his experience leans slightly over Brendan Queen. I think his value makes him better play than Tyler Ankrum. And he seems like a guy that I'm going to be interested in quite a lot. Now, there is a case to be made for somebody like Chris Wright. If the race is expected to be crazy, a driver who, by definition, wrecks people, involve a lot of wrecks, especially at road courses. There's been so many times over the years, if you've played any of this stuff for more than 3 years, you've distinctly seen Chris Wright run 9th, run 8th, run 12th, and then get, either cause a crash or get wrecked out at the very end of the race. Okay, if everybody in this field is expected to race like a freaking Neanderthal, then Chris Wright starting 20th doesn't seem like that bad of a play. Like, he should realistically run 15th, 16th all day, regardless of once people shake through the standings and kind of filter their way into where they should be. I think Chris Wright is a pretty good pivot as well. Let me look at this exposure really fast here. See if there's anything crazier, anything popping out here. I think taking shots on just trying to get different in terms of lineups, like Caden Honeycutt. He's starting 19th. Now, clearly, Majeski, Lane Riggs, these guys are way better than Caden, right? But just for the sake of, not having, 90% of Lane Riggs, not, just using somebody to get different. That's kind of where Caden Honeycutt's fallen in line in my exposures here. Let's see. Like I said, I really tried to stay away from playing quote unquote bad teams, but it really does seem like I'm not chasing a early lap leader or anybody really starting the front half of the field. Not front half of the field in the top 10. I do have some Jake Garcia, I do have some Chandler Smith, but nothing to really write home about. Let's see. No problem, John. I know you're not going to the cup race, but my buddy wants to. I don't know what side. I mean, just do it, right? I have no. I have very little experience with sportsmen and stuff just because I'm in Texas and I just can't do that. I have dabbled a bit on DK predictions, even though their odds are pretty dog shit. But I think the best time to bet any top 10 or whatever is before practice and before qualifying. After that, the lines are going to get much more accurate of where they should be. I don't lean any way on this, honestly. I think the cup race is going to be extremely hard for both those guys to get a top 10. Maybe betting both on an individual level, but that's that's my opinion on that. But yeah, so the truck or last on this truck race before I move to Xfinity, I do think we see quite a lot of yellows, and I mean, Butcher hitting that wall yesterday really showed how awesome these cars look when they plow into a concrete wall. If anybody gets off kilter into the wall or whatever, their day is going to be completely done. Like, it's going to destroy the car to where they're going to go laps down or whatever. So lastly, as I said, when I first started, I had nearly like 90-95% Hemrick lane rigs and Infinger and Eckes and stuff. I really went out of my way to at least diversify up there a bit. So hopefully that saves me, in case, rigs gets destroyed or whatever. Probably favorite play is Timmy Hill. I got him at 34% in my own stuff. I really like Timmy Hill today. He fills out a lot of lineups. As we move on to the Xfinity race at COTA, now obviously this is the exact opposite. We had a ton of qualifying, or not a ton of, well, I mean, we had a ton of qualifying laps and practice laps and stuff. Who DM'd me? What is going on here? Interesting. I will get back to that in a minute. Connor, SVG, clearly the two guys who will be contending for a win. If that does not happen, Sam Mayer, Hill, Allgaier, Jesse Love would be the next of kin, next people to compete for a win in this race. But I really do believe it's between Connor Zilich and SVG. Now, I have played a lot of SVG. I played a lot of SVG last year in the Connor versus SVG, kind of debates and stuff, or races when they went head to head in Xfinity. And I wish I played Connor last year. So I prefer Connor over SVG. Now, I do have these two guys projected for first and second. I have them for the top and second amount of laps led. Same thing. I mean, it should be these two guys competing for the race. Okay. If Connor, for whatever reason, falls out of the race or falters, SVG should win the race. If SVG or whatever cannot compete with Connor, Connor should win the race. It's just as simple as that, right? They're expensive for a reason. And it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, for both of them to work in a lineup together. And I mean, this race is 65 laps. Unless we have, like, I'm going to tell you right now, as a baseline, I have Connor starting where he finishes, leading 26 laps, 18 fast laps. That's 59.6 points. Depending on what the field does, okay, now everybody qualified where they should be, but depending on where the field finishes, that could be the highest score on the slate at 59 points, right? And if that is the case, then I would think that he should be able to work into the winning lineup with a bunch of people scoring either 40s or high 30s at the very least. Okay. Same thing with SVG. I think those guys are able to project very similar. And the fact that Connor is actually cheaper kind of blows my noggin, because I thought for sure that Connor Zilich they should swap their prices. So I will happily take the 14 on Connor. Everything other than that is going to come down to where these guys are and how good of a value they are. If we're having to pay up, right, then I would expect that you either need a baseline 5x from somebody like at min price like Ryan Ellis, or somebody at least able to score in the high 30s, if not 40s, from their starting position. So who are drivers that fall into that category for this event? I'm going to start from the back of the field and go up. I think Jeb Burton is a really, really, really good play from 34th. Yes, the starting position and practice doesn't reflect that, but I think Jeb Burton, based on how he typically performs at road courses, I think Jeb Burton is a pretty good play. I think Retzloff is a pretty good play. I mean, obviously, yet again, Brendan Poole, if he's just not too expensive starting 26th, he should be able to gain 8 positions in a race like this. I really, really like Dean Thompson at 27th today in a Sam Hunt car. We've seen Dean Thompson run decently well. Like once he got, I mean, you got to remember we're watching like children drive around on these stupid tracks, right? Brent Cruz, child, literal infant child at 17 years old started 7th today. We were watching children develop, right? So yes, Dean Thompson used to wreck a ton of stuff, right? because he was like 12, right? Okay, he's ran a lot of races now. He's ran a lot of ARCA, and has ran pretty decently at um, road courses in decent cars once he like stopped, wrecking. Like these guys are young people, right? Um, so those are the guys in the back of the field that I can realistically see kind of, hitting that like minimum 36, 37. In most situations, Harrison Burton would probably jump on that, but I don't really want to stretch too high into the pricing yet. I'm looking through if there's anything else that I need to really worry about. I will say that I do have exposure to Kyle Sieg, JJ. I'm only running 25 for this one because I think this race I'm more concerned about duplication, especially if Connor or SVG are optimal, because they're, due to how expensive they are, it puts a lot of kind of more ownership on these, 5x plays or these guys who can perform very decently, because I think you have to play cheap guys to be able to afford the expensive dudes, right? There's only a certain amount of cheap guys who can actually perform, and if you're getting too crazy, like I don't really want to play Balicki over Poole, Thompson, Retzloff, Jeb Burton, right? Yes, Balicki could work. Yes, Blaine Perkins could work, but I just think those guys are better than them. And I don't really want to just be burning lineups trying to get, the low owned, 1v1 in the value range when this race could potentially be very, very duplicated. Moving up through the field, I think that the Joe Gibbs cars have a real good chance at scoring 5x in the high 40s. Okay. Taylor Gray specifically, we've seen Taylor Gray really compete last year. Just, yellows and other situations didn't allow him to finish some of these races where he probably should have. But I really like Taylor Gray today. I like Jesse Love starting 11th. I like Williams Wallace starting 15th. These are drivers that I'm interested in getting to. Yet again, if we're focused on Connor and SVG, it's really hard to play Austin Hill. It's really hard to play Jones. It's really hard to play Allgaier. So and so you need those guys to fail in order for those individuals to show up. When I first ran my stuff, I was very heavily pushing Connor Zilich. I manually went in and built just did some hand builds to make sure I at least have exposure to SVG today in case that works out. When I look at the exposure rates for this one here, because I think now Zilich should have that tire issue in practice, but I'm not concerned about that. I do want to check. I don't believe they're going to the rear, but obviously do your due diligence before the race starts, see if anybody's going to the rear, but I don't believe that is going to happen here. Okay, so willpower went into the wall, or whatever. I have 74% Connor Zilich in this second race today. That's where I'm at. Everybody else is pretty much spread out between 50% exposure rates for the people that I like based on my data. Let's see what else is going on. I think you can fade both if this race either has a lot of yellows or, I mean, it's 65 laps, so like usually we're concerned about, do these laps like get spread out, and I mean, these guys could switch the lead every other lap, but it's very likely that either Connor or SVG will probably lead 70% of this race, if not more. Okay. So you have that going for them. Okay. That automatically probably eliminates the other one, right? But if these guys, if either of them don't win, that's automatically like they're not going to be in the winning lineup and stuff, right? If that's the situation, then I would see, your lineup should probably be very heavy on, Sam Mayer, Jesse Love, Gray, Creek, Quapple, Allgaier and stuff. And if you eliminate Connor Zilich and SVG, you could make some pretty decent lines with Xfinity regulars. You just need those guys to falter, and I really don't want to do that. I will say that I think Sam Mayer is probably my favorite to win the race if Connor or Zilich falter. But those are really my only real opinions there. Okay, that was James retweeting the stream. Let's see what else is going on. I think that's mainly it. Let's see. We have 2 hours until the truck race locks. We have nearly 5 hours for Xfinity locks. I think. I mean, that basically covered everything. Truck contest. That's about 5,000 people left. We got about 5,000 or 500 people left. O'Reilly has about 5,000 places left. I think that's mainly it. I'm probably not going to play UFC tonight unless just wild stuff happens early in this truck race. I like the truck race more from DFS versus Xfinity today. I think the volatility factor of trucks is very appealing to potentially have solo lineups and can potentially get different versus where I feel like we're very constrained from an approach for COTA and stuff. I would not do this. I think it is absolutely one or the other, and I prefer Connor over SVG. Anywho, I think that's mainly it. I don't really have anything else to add, and thank you guys for being here, sitting here, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. See ya. Bye bye.